stepdad who got shunned by his own children for being uninvolved all their lives thinks he can undo it. All in play happy family. With me and in a pathetic attempt to do the same shreds crocodile tears at a family event that had nothing to do with him. But turns out he just ruined everything because I lost it and called him out on his BS Straightway. Now he and mom are claiming that I created a scene at an event that had nothing to do with us. But I'm laughing in their face because this isn't even the worst of what they're going to see. So, I'll just get into it. Earlier this week, I attended my cousin's wedding with my mom and stepdad, and at the rehearsal dinner there was a huge scene with my family and my mom is blaming me for it. But I don't think it's my fault. I think it was David, my stepdad, who crossed the line, and that's why I lost it at him. For context, somebody was talking about my wedding, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden David started making it about himself. All three of us were seated together at the same table, and my mom's sister and her family were also sitting with us. So it was my aunt who brought up the topic of my wedding, and she was actually discussing it with me. So there was no reason for David to interject anyway, but he did. And all of a sudden, he started talking about how he had been very excited to walk me down the aisle. But there were just a couple of weeks to go and I still haven't asked him, so he's assuming that I'm not planning on having him walk me down the aisle. He started talking about how disappointed he was, making it very awkward for everyone at the table because nobody knew what to say. And then, all of a sudden, he actually started tearing up. Under ordinary circumstances, people might have felt bad for him, but I didn't feel bad for him at all because I knew exactly what he was trying to do. He was trying to make me feel bad for not asking him to walk me down the aisle because right now I was his only shot at walking anyone down the aisle at all, since neither of his own daughters are close to him. So he had been feeling very emotional about all of this, and my mom had told me about it already. She had even tried to convince me to ask him to walk me, but I refused because David had only been a part of my life for the past 5 years. If he had been my stepfather for most of my life and actually being a father figure to me, I might have considered asking him, but that's not the case. I didn't even meet him until I was 18 and my mom started dating him, so I don't know why they were even expecting me to ask him. Besides, I'm not some replacement kid that he has as a backup. My own father passed away when I was 13, and in honor of him, I'm gonna walk down by myself because nobody can ever replace him for me. So my mom had some guts even asking me to entertain the idea of having David walk me, especially when she knew whatever I was planning on doing. On top of that, when she knew that I wasn't okay with David having these sorts of expectations from me, she should have discouraged him from pressing the issue further. But, at the rehearsal dinner, when David started tearing up, she took a very accusatory tone with me and said that, given the fact that he's my stepdad, this is the least that I can do for him, and at least ask him to walk down the aisle at this point since he's crying and this obviously means a lot to him. That's when I finally snapped. Until then, I was still holding back because I didn't want to ruin my cousin's rehearsal dinner with an outburst, but they had been getting on my nerves about this for the past couple of weeks and I just couldn't handle this anymore. So I told him off then and there. I called him out on his behavior and said that he was just being a huge phony because I knew exactly what this was about. He was just upset that he was never going to get the opportunity to be the kind of father that others are, and is nobody else's fault but his own. I've spoken to his other daughters. Both of them are slightly older than me and are already married. I've met them several times over the past few years and they are really nice people. We get along well, and they've also confided in me about how they are not very close to David because he was always uninvolved in their lives and always kept his distance from them, even when they were kids. And after he divorced their mother, when they were in the middle school, he was supposed to spend the weekends with them. But even then, he would cancel quite frequently and slowly they just grew apart. Only recently did he start trying to get back into their lives once again, but it was too late. They are used to living without him now and have shut him out. And they have told me that judging by his behavior around me, they could see that he was trying to be more of a dad to me, even though I was already a grown adult, because he was trying to make up for lost time with his own daughters. So after they had confided in me about all this, I could finally make sense of his behavior because before that, I had always found it very weird that he used to treat me like a kid even though I wasn't one. I used to feel bad for him, but then he just became too overbearing and needy and, like I said, I had my own father and I didn't need anybody to replace him. So I started distancing myself from him too. And this whole thing with the walking me down the aisle situation, it was just him trying to insert himself in a situation where he didn't belong just because his biological daughters had chosen to walk down the aisle without him as well, and I don't even blame them for it. Anyway, all of this came up while I was telling him off and I got a bit shrill, so the nearby tables also heard me, and I'm sure it was pretty embarrassing for him because I did say a lot of things in addition to whatever I have mentioned. I called him phony. I told him that he had failed at being a father and there was no point in trying to be my dad now because I wasn't looking for a replacement anyway. So after that, of course, dinner was pretty awkward because David went back to our room and so did my mother. So they were absent for the rest of the evening. Of course, after that, I did apologize to my cousin for getting loud, and I explained the situation to her, and luckily she didn't mind it too much because she could understand where it was coming from. But the next day, the day of the wedding, I noticed that my mom and David weren't there, and my aunt told me that they had left, and my mom had very specifically told my aunt to tell me that the only reason they had left was because of the way I had humiliated David the previous evening. She had told my aunt to let me know that she thought I was a horrible daughter, and apparently, I was extremely insensitive because David was only trying to be accepted into our family, but I had insulted him just for trying to be a good stepdad to me. And on top of that, I had made that whole evening about myself instead of thinking about my cousin who was getting married. David also called me rude, insensitive, and disrespectful, and I could tell that even my aunt thought that I had overreacted. But the thing is, they didn't know that my mom had been pushing it for weeks now, and even David had been hinting at it repeatedly, even after I had made it clear that I was not going to ask him to walk me down the aisle. Anyway, the things that my mom had said really ticked me off, especially because this was David's fault. He had no reason to interject in a conversation where he was not required and make it all about himself in the first place. Especially the part where he started tearing up, because that was a bit too much, and for some reason both of them seemed bent on making me out to be the villain, which is why they had said all that to my aunt in the first place. So, since they're getting other people involved in the heat of the moment after speaking to my aunt, I decided to call up David's daughter and tell them everything about the situation. And of course, they were also not very happy about it because they agreed with me that David was just trying to play happy family with me and trying to force his way into being a part of my wedding in a more fatherly capacity because he had lost his chance with them. That's exactly what it looks like to them as well. So I know that I'm not being crazy here, and even my fiancé agrees with me. But my friends are divided and, like I already said, my aunt and a couple of other relatives who heard me at the rehearsal dinner were also divided by my behavior because they have been very cool towards me ever since. To add to that, after I spoke to David's daughters, they told me that they would also not be speaking to him at all until he apologized to me for trying to pressure me into something like this. So now, my mom is even more mad at me and is constantly calling and texting me, accusing me of turning everyone against David and trying to play the victim here. But I think he's the one doing that, and it is just a very confusing situation right now. And with my wedding coming up in a few weeks, I don't want anything wrong before that. So I need to be sure that I've done the right thing, and that's why I'm asking Ida for calling out my stepdad publicly for being fake and trying to play happy family with me because he lost the chance with his own daughters. Update 1. Okay, so I think that I might have reacted a bit harshly, but, honestly, that doesn't mean that I need to apologize to anybody. After all, he was the one who brought the topic up and inserted himself in the conversation where he did not belong just to make it all about himself and start acting like a crybaby. I mean, what were they even expecting? That all of a sudden I would start feeling bad about not including him in the wedding and offer him the chance to walk me down the aisle then and there? I had already made it very clear to both of them that I did not want that, and yet they just couldn't drop it, not even at my cousin's rehearsal dinner. I think they are the ones who need to do some introspection because they made the whole thing about themselves, not me. But anyway, I'm really grateful to everybody who responded to my post and gave me advice. The past few days have been difficult for me, especially given the fact that the wedding is coming up and I really don't want people turning against me before the biggest day of my life. It's just going to make everything more stressful for me. But I've spoken with my fiancé about it, and he has reassured me that anybody who lets this particular incident color their opinion of me just because they want to trust my mom over their personal experience with me, it's their loss and not mine. And I don't need to worry about these people because at the end of the day, we're going to have a lot of people there who genuinely love and care for us. And that's all that matters. Anybody else who doesn't show up, they don't even matter. And that's the kind of energy that I'm carrying with me right now because I simply cannot and frankly will not deal with any kind of extra stress. And as for whatever his daughters have decided, I think that's their personal choice. I didn't force them to do anything, so I don't need to feel guilty about that. Besides, if he hadn't been uninvolved in their lives right from their childhood, then none of this would have ever happened. He had been so busy with his work, his social life, his dating life, and all that, but he barely ever made time for his own children. Or maybe he didn't like spending time with them. Whatever it was, now he can walk whatever he spent his time on down the aisle because he had one chance with his kids and he blew it. However, I might have reacted, and that's not my fault, and my parents can play the victim however much they want to, but that's not going to change the facts. But like I said, I don't want to rant about this anymore. I'm done. Whoever wants to attend the wedding is welcome to do so. Whoever doesn't, they're free to stay away. I'm not going to force anyone to do anything that they don't want to do. Just like, nobody can force me to do anything that I don't want. It's just as simple as that now. Update 2. Okay, hi. So it's been 8 days since the incident at the wedding, and today, David's daughters reached out to me and told me that they had not been speaking to him after whatever I told them. But today, He reached out to both of them and said that he was really sorry about whatever had happened in the past, but that was no reason to treat him like this in the present. After all, he was getting older and he needed his kids to support him at his age. And he was not talking about financial support, but just emotional support where they would come to visit him a couple of times a month and just try to be there for him. But if they were not even prepared to do that because they were holding on to the past, then he had nothing else to say to them because he had tried his best to repair his relationship with them, but it hadn't worked. Since they were clearly bent on making him the villain here, he had nothing more to say to them. And after this, he told them that he would never be texting them again. That was a huge deal because, up until now, he was still trying to win them over, trying to get them to visit with the grandkids and stuff. So him giving up on this was a pretty big deal. But they told me that they don't mind it because they're not attached to him in the first place. Still, I felt kinda bad for him until I remembered whatever had happened and then I stopped. I have blocked my mom and David and they haven't been able to reach out to me for a couple of days, so I haven't had any contact with them. Before this, they were only bothering me to get me to apologize to David and take back whatever I had said. So I don't think that they're interested in repairing their relationship with me. They are only interested in getting me to apologize, making me the villain and them the victims. And it's exactly this victim mentality of theirs that will ruin all their relationships. But that is hardly something I need to worry about. Honestly, I'm okay with fighting with David and not talking to him because, just like his own kids, I'm not that attached to him either. Neither do I have any reason to be. He's not my real father nor has he raised me. But I'm just a little shocked about my mother because I can't believe that she's prepared to miss my wedding over something like this. It just tells you a lot about her because as far as I know, David's ex-wife, mother to his daughters, had always been on their daughter's side. And here, look at my mom prepared to miss her only daughter's wedding just because I'm not gonna ask her husband to walk me down the aisle because he missed the chance with his own kids. I don't even know what to make of it because we haven't had a bad relationship in the past, so I don't know why he's doing this. But all I know is that she's going to regret this in the future if she actually ends up skipping my wedding. Because if that happens, I'm never ever going to forgive her no matter what she says. And I'm serious about that. I'm done with her, especially given the circumstances. She knows exactly why I was not willing to ask anybody to walk me down the aisle. It's not like I didn't have anybody in mind if I wanted somebody. Of course it wouldn't have been David because I don't look up to him as a father. But after my father, if anybody had come close, it would have been my uncle, and he is still around. I would have asked my uncle, but I explained the whole emotional logic to my mom and she still didn't care for it much. I don't understand how or why this is so important to her. I don't understand what stake she has in this. But her behavior just has been really disappointing and I don't know what to expect from her anymore. I just don't know. Update 3. So, there are just 2 weeks to go until my wedding and most of the guests who have been invited have RSVP'd that they are going to be attending. In spite of all that my fiancé had told me, I still have been feeling a little worried that maybe my parents had been able to sway all the people in the family, and maybe nobody would end up showing up to my wedding, but I don't think that they are taking my mom and David that seriously either. Speaking of those two, like I had mentioned in my last update, I hadn't had any contact with them after I blocked them, but recently, couple of days back, my mom showed up at my house. It was very awkward in the beginning because I didn't know what to say to her, but then she did most of the talking. She wasn't here to apologize though. She was just here to tell me that I was making a huge mistake and that I was going to regret this for the rest of my life. I mean, that's funny because I think that's pretty much exactly what I said about her in my last update. So I guess we are both more similar in our way of thought. We would like to admit the only difference is that I think that I'm right and she thinks that she is. Anyway, she told me that right now, she is a married woman, and whether I like it or not, her husband is her priority, so I can't just disrespect him and get away with it. She wouldn't have allowed it to happen to my father when she had been married to him, and she can't allow it to happen to David either. She told me that if I had loved her, I would have been respectful to the people that she loves, whether or not I'm close to them or not. And this is the one thing that David and she had asked of me. So the least I could have done was honor that, knowing what he has been through with his own children. Once again, I could tell that she was trying to guilt-trip me, so I made it very clear to her that I knew exactly what he had been through with his own kids, but that was nobody else's fault but his own. And even though she acknowledged the fact that he had been uninvolved in their lives, she insisted that it had all been in the past and now his kids should give him a fair chance to repair their relationship, but they're not even willing to do that much. It was pretty frustrating because she just refused to see that they were not the victims here, no matter how they looked at the situation. I really tried my best to explain to her that now that he wants to, he can't just roll back into his kids' lives and expect them to take him back happily. They have grown up without his involvement in their lives, so now they're used to it. And the expectation that they're just going to forgive him and pretend that everything is fine, that's unreasonable. They don't have to do that and I'm completely with them on this. But instead of trying to understand my point of view, My mom instantly started off on how our generation is so ungrateful and how he had been working for the betterment of his own kids, and yet they couldn't see that. They just had to make him the villain and I couldn't stand it. There was obviously no talking to her. In her head, nothing could change the fact that she and David were the victims here. And so, after a while of letting her rant, I told her that we were done here. I really don't have anything more to say to her and I don't think that she had anything new to add to this either. She had already said that I would regret this and I told her that I was fine with regretting it because whatever the situation was, I was not going to go back on my word and ask David to walk me down the aisle just because she thought that that's what I should do. I'm going to do what I want to do, and she doesn't have the right to tell me and boss me around. And even with me, she tried to play the ungrateful card saying that she had done everything to raise me to be a good kid, and yet I couldn't do this one little thing for her that would make her and David so happy. And I told her that I don't have to make them happy, that this is my wedding day we're talking about, and it's about me, not about them. Besides, I really am grateful for whatever she had done for me after my dad passed away. But that doesn't mean that I have to do everything that she says, especially considering the fact that she's my mother and she pretty much had to take over. She owed it to me because I was her child and it's not like I tried to make her life difficult either. I tried my best to be a good kid and always tried to do right by her so I could use the same logic for her now that I'm declining this one request. Why can't she take it? Anyway, after a while, we were just talking in circles, so I asked her to leave and she told me that if she leaves, she's never going to come back again. She's not going to attend my wedding and she's just never going to talk to me again. I got a little choked, but I told her that I was fine with that and then she left. And then I had a good cry and after my fiancé came back home since he had been out with his friends. I explained everything that happened to him as well and I realized that no matter how angry I was with my mom, I'm still gonna miss her at my wedding but he made me realize that I had taken a stand for myself and I should be proud of myself because it's not easy to stand against your own family. He comforted me and I'm really grateful for that because otherwise I might have just given in to my mom's demands only to have her at my wedding, to be honest. But luckily, that didn't happen and I'm gonna stand by what I said. I'm not gonna go back on my word no matter what happens. Update 4. Hey, so, there's just a couple of days to go before my wedding, and today I received a call at work from a number I did not recognize, and at first I thought about not answering because my gut feeling told me that this was either David or my mom and I didn't want to speak to either of them. But then they just kept calling again and again so at one point I decided that I should just block the number but for some reason I ended up picking it up and just as I had expected it was David on the other end. And to my surprise, he told me that he was not calling to demand that I let him walk me down the aisle or anything else, but he was just trying to get through to me so he could tell me that my mom was miserable. Apparently, ever since our last interaction, she had been really distraught and had become very quiet and distant. She was always very upset that she was not going to be attending the wedding and she was even more upset that I was fine with that. So now he was calling me to ask if I would just contact her and ask her to come to the wedding and he didn't even want anything else. He just wanted me to talk to her for a bit, ask her to come to the wedding and that's it. And as much as it hurt me, I had to decline because if she wanted to come to the wedding, she would have to contact me herself. I hadn't done anything wrong. I haven't said anything to hurt her so if anything she should be the one coming up to me. I already have a lot on my plate. I don't want to deal with this right now and that's what I told David. If they wanted to attend the wedding I was open to that, but other than that I was not going out of my way to make it up to my mother, especially when I hadn't done anything wrong. And before he could say anything else I hung up because honestly I have tried my patience with my mom. I just can't do this anymore. If she wants to attend the wedding, she's more than welcome to do so as a guest. But I'm not going to talk to her, convince her to come and all of that. It's not my fault and I'm not obliged to do anything. She's miserable only because she created a situation where she feels like this. So unfair for David to expect me to reach out to her and I'm definitely going to stand by that. Update 5. So, I got married a couple of days ago and it went well. My mom and David did not attend though and I was a bit sad about it in the beginning. But then as the day went on I completely forgot about that because I had so much fun. And after all, it was my wedding day. It was supposed to be about me. So I made sure that I didn't think about any of my problems because my fiancé made it much easier and I really lucked out because he's a wonderful person and he made sure that I had the best day ever. Now, in a couple of days we're going to be leaving for our honeymoon and I can't wait. As for my mother, clearly she has already decided that she doesn't want me in her life and I'm fine with that. It may be a bit sad but I can't change it nor do I want to do anything about it. I have accepted things as they are and I'm just going to move on. So, this honeymoon trip is going to be a much needed relief from everything.